I was 13 the first time I heard the screaming next door. It was a gray Tuesday evening in southeast London, and I was sitting on the windowsill of my bedroom on Elmstead Road, trying to finish my homework while watching the rain slide down the glass. Our neighbor's house always seemed unusually quiet, too tidy, too still. But that night, something changed. Through the thin walls of our semi-detached, I heard a voice. Sharp, panicked, female. Then a crash. My pen froze mid-sentence. I crept closer to the window and squinted through the drizzle. Their kitchen light flickered behind closed blinds, shadows shifting frantically behind them. I held my breath. Mum didn't seem to hear it. She was downstairs, fussing over dinner and humming to some old song. I went down, casually mentioning the noise next door, but she brushed it off with a wave of her hand. They probably dropped something, she said. People have accidents. But it didn't sound like an accident. The next day I saw her, the girl from next door. She was around my age, pale with jet black hair, wearing a thick hoodie that seemed to swallow her whole. We bumped into each other outside the corner shop on Burnt Ash Lane. She looked startled, as though she hadn't expected to be seen. "Hi," I said awkwardly. "You all right?" She gave a tight nod but didn't meet my eyes. Then she left, quick steps disappearing into the mist. I wanted to call out, ask her name, but something held me back. Maybe it was the haunted look in her eyes. Maybe it was fear. Later that week, I started noticing more things. The way their curtains were always drawn. How the girl never walked to school, only came back late in the afternoon with her hood up and eyes down. And once, when I passed by their gate, I saw bruises. Faint, yellowing ones just peeking out from her sleeve. I didn't tell anyone. At school, everything was routine. Lessons, homework, pretending I cared about gossip. But I kept thinking about her. Why didn't she speak to anyone? What happened in that house at night? One afternoon, I saw her again. She was standing at the bus stop, holding a broken phone, and looking around as if waiting for something or someone. I crossed the road and approached slowly. "You dropped this the other day," I lied, holding on an old sticker I found in my pocket. She took it with confusion and a half smile. "Thanks," she whispered, then turned to walk away. "Wait, what's your name?" I asked. She hesitated. "Maisie," she said softly. "Maisie Ford." From that moment on, my teenage years took a turn I never expected. Maisie's secret was darker than anything I had imagined, and getting close to her would come at a price. I just didn't know it yet. Maisie started appearing more often after that day. Not in a friendly way. She was always cautious, her eyes darting about like a rabbit ready to bolt. But slowly, a fragile thread formed between us. Sometimes we walked in silence. Sometimes she let out small pieces of herself, like puzzle fragments. I learned that she liked astronomy, that she'd never had a birthday party, that she hated loud noises. I learned that her dad worked nights and was strict. She always said it with a forced laugh, like the word tasted sour. One Thursday evening, I invited her to sit with me by the canal just off Grove Park. She looked around nervously, then sat down, arms wrapped around her knees. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" I said quietly. Maisie didn't answer. Her fingers dug into the sleeves of her coat. I waited. Eventually, she whispered, "He locks the doors from the outside." I turned to look at her, but she kept her eyes on the water. "My dad. When he leaves, I'm not allowed out." I felt my stomach twist. "Does your mum know?" I asked. Maisie scoffed. "She left years ago." I didn't know what to say. I was only 14. What could I do? But I knew this wasn't normal. My own house was a noisy mess of burnt toast, missed buses, and Mum's endless complaining. But never this. Never fear. At home that night, I Googled things I didn't know how to phrase. I read about emotional abuse, about child neglect, about social services. But every story had warnings. Once you speak, there's no turning back. Maisie didn't come to school for 2 days. When she finally returned, she had a split lip and a deep bruise on her collarbone. She tried to cover it with makeup, but I saw. Everyone saw. Yet no one said a word. "I fell," she mumbled when I asked. But I knew she didn't. We sat in the back corner of the library, behind a wall of encyclopedias. "I'm scared he'll kill me one day," she whispered, barely audible. I stared at her, heart pounding. "You can't stay there," I said. "You have to tell someone." Maisie looked at me with a mixture of pain and something else. Hope, maybe. "No one listens," she said. "I will," I replied, and I meant it. After that day, everything moved quickly. I started writing things down, dates, injuries, times I saw her locked inside. I didn't know what I was doing exactly, but it felt like proof. One night, she rang our doorbell. It was midnight, and the rain was coming down hard. Mom was asleep. I opened the door to find her shaking, her hair soaked, shoes missing. "He found my notebook," she said, voice trembling. "He knows I wrote about him." I let her in without a word. That was the night everything changed. Maisie stayed with us for 2 nights. My mom didn't ask too many questions at first. She knew something was wrong. Of course she did. She gave Maisie clean pajamas, warm food, and let her sleep in my room. No pressure, just kindness. But by the 3rd morning, Mom sat down with us, her tea untouched. "Maisie, sweetheart," she said gently. "Do you want to tell me what's going on?" Maisie hesitated, eyes flicking between Mom and me. Then, in a shaky voice, she told her everything. The locks, the shouting, the bruises, the fear. I saw Mom's expression change as the words poured out. Her lips tightened, her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She picked up the phone and called social services. Maisie gripped my hand the entire time. An emergency worker came that afternoon. A quiet woman with kind eyes and a clipboard. She spoke to Maisie alone for nearly an hour. When they came out, Maisie looked drained but lighter somehow. She was taken into emergency foster care that evening. I didn't sleep at all that night. My room felt empty without her, like the silence itself was waiting for something. I stared at the ceiling, thinking of her face when she climbed into the car. There had been a flicker of gratitude, but mostly fear. Over the next few weeks, I saw her only at school. She kept to herself. The old bruises faded, but something inside her stayed tense, guarded. I tried to talk to her, but she seemed afraid to say too much. I understood. She was trying to survive. Then one day, she passed me a note. "Meet me after school. Alone. Park near the bakery." When I got there, she was already waiting, sitting on the swings. The wind tangled her hair. Her eyes were sharp, intense. "I need your help," she said. "With what?" I asked. She glanced around. "My dad's trying to get custody back. He says everything's fine now." That I lied. My chest tightened. "But you didn't." "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "But he's got this lawyer, and I don't know if anyone believes me. They're saying there's not enough evidence. Just my word." I thought of my scribbled notes. The dates, the bruises, the way she had looked when she stood on our doorstep that night in the rain. "I kept records," I said. "From before. Everything I saw." I wrote it down. Her eyes widened. "You did." I nodded. Maisie looked away, blinking fast. "I think he's watching me," she whispered. "He follows me sometimes." I saw him outside my foster home. A cold wave passed through me. "We'll tell them," I said. "We'll tell them everything. You're not alone." She nodded slowly, but I could see it. Beneath her calm face, a storm was brewing. Something was coming. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope. I brought my notebook to school, tucked carefully in my bag. It had everything, dates, conversations, descriptions. I had written it all in the hopes it might one day help Maisie. Now that day had come. Maisie arranged a meeting with her social worker, and I was invited to speak. I had never done anything like it before. My palms sweated as I waited in the office, my notebook on my lap. The social worker, Miss Dale, listened patiently as I read aloud some of the things I had written. He locked her in the bedroom for over 5 hours. She missed dinner that night. I remember, because I brought her a sandwich through the window the next morning. Miss Dale nodded and took notes. Her eyes never left my face. "Thank you," she said softly. This will help. Maisie squeezed my hand when we left. For the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. But the peace was short-lived. That evening, my mom got a phone call. Her face went pale as she listened. "What is it?" I asked once she hung up. That was Maisie's foster mother. Her dad was seen outside the house again. He was parked in a black car for nearly an hour. My stomach turned. The next morning, the entire school buzzed with whispers. I arrived at my locker to find it slightly open. Inside, there was a note. No name. Just a single line. "Stay out of things you don't understand." My heart raced. I showed it to Maisie. She didn't speak. Just crumpled the paper slowly, her fingers shaking. "I think he's watching both of us," she said. It was then I realized the danger wasn't just in Maisie's past. It was creeping into our present. And maybe into our futures too. That weekend, I caught sight of the car. A black Vauxhall, parked at the end of my street. At first I thought I was imagining it. But the next day, it was there again. And this time I saw him, Maisie's dad, sitting behind the wheel, staring straight ahead. He didn't move. Didn't even blink. I ran home, heart pounding, locked every door, and closed every curtain. Mom called the police, but without a direct threat, they said there wasn't much they could do. "We're keeping an eye," they said. "Just be careful." Careful. It felt like walking through fog with someone breathing down your neck. Maisie and I met less in person after that. We texted often, code words and updates. She was moved to a new foster home in another borough. Safer, hopefully. But we both knew the truth. He wasn't done. And we were being watched. Weeks passed, and the black Vauxhall stopped showing up. The air seemed to lift slightly, though the tension never quite disappeared. I started sleeping better, and Maisie said her new foster home felt quieter. But it was only the calm before the storm. One night, I woke up to a strange sound. A creak. Then another. I sat up in bed, my heart thudding. It was past 2 a.m. I held my breath. Then came a soft knock on the front door. Mom was asleep, and the house was dark. Another knock. Slow. Deliberate. I crept to the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to peek. Nothing. The street outside looked empty. But the knocking continued. Then a voice. Muffled, low. "Maisie." It froze my blood. I rushed to Mum's room, shook her awake. "There's someone at the door," I whispered. He said Maisie's name. She was up in seconds, grabbed her phone, and called the police. We didn't open the door, just waited. The knocking had stopped by the time sirens filled the street. The officers found no one outside, but there were footprints on the front step. Size 10, muddy, leading away into the dark. Maisie was moved again the next day. No warning, no contact. I didn't know where she had gone. School became unbearable. Everyone had questions. Rumors spread fast. Some kids said she'd run away. Others said she'd been taken. But I knew the truth. She was being hidden. And then the messages started. Notes in my locker again. Scraps of paper slipped into my bag. One of them simply read, "You can't protect her forever." Another said, "She'll come back to me. She always does." I was afraid to leave school alone. Mum drove me every day now. I stopped walking past certain streets. Avoided shortcuts. Then, one afternoon, I received a message from a private number. A photo. It was taken from behind a fence, through slats. Maisie, in her school uniform, standing in a different part of the city. The caption read, "Found her." My hands trembled. I showed Mum immediately. We called the police, and they took the phone as evidence. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the voice, "Maisie," over and over. The sound of the knock. And in the silence that followed, I realized something awful. Maisie's dad wasn't just dangerous. He was patient, and he was getting closer. The next few days blurred together in a haze of fear and silence. The police promised they were doing everything they could, but their faces said otherwise. No leads. No arrests. Just warnings to stay alert and report anything strange. At school, I kept my head down. My friends avoided me now. Whispers followed me in the corridors like ghosts. I was the girl from the news. The one whose friend vanished. The one being hunted by her father's shadow. Then, on Friday, just after lunch, I saw him. Not fully. Not clearly. But enough. He was across the road, just behind the school gates. Wearing a navy coat, cap pulled low. Watching. My skin prickled. I ducked behind a pillar, heart racing. I tried to convince myself it was just a man, any man. But I knew. I felt it. Maisie's father. I reported it again. The school went into partial lockdown. Police came, but he was gone. And I was drowning in helplessness. That evening, I sat in my room staring at the wall. Mum brought me tea, tried to smile. But her hands trembled as she set it down. I wish we could do more, she whispered. I hate feeling powerless. I nodded, but I was done being afraid. I pulled out the last note he had left me. She'll come back to me. That meant he knew where she was. Or he had followed the council's movement. And if he could follow them, maybe I could too. I opened my laptop, logged into an old forum I used to use when I was obsessed with true crime stories. I posted a question, vague but curious. How easy is it to track council placements for foster children? I didn't expect a reply, but within minutes I had one. A user called Mercury Star responded. Depends who you are. If you know the area and have a contact inside the system, it's not hard. I messaged back privately. Said I was writing a story, that I wanted to know if anyone had ever done it. They sent me a name. A private investigator in London. Someone who had a history of helping separated families find each other. Sometimes legally. Sometimes not. That night, while Mum was asleep, I called the number. A woman answered. Her voice was flat. Tired. Who gave you my number? I hesitated. Then, I told her the truth. My best friend is in hiding from her father. He's dangerous. And I think he's already found her. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, meet me tomorrow. Noon. Borough Market. By the old bookstall. And the line went dead. I didn't tell Mum. I just packed my bag and set my alarm. Because for the first time, I felt something stronger than fear. I felt a spark of defiance. I was going to find Maisie. No matter what. Borough Market buzzed with life as usual. Tourists shuffled past artisanal cheese stands and baskets of sourdough, unaware that my heart was pounding in my throat. I clutched my phone tightly and scanned the crowd near the old bookstall, where weathered hardbacks leaned against cracked wooden crates. Then I saw her. Mid-40s maybe, short gray-blonde hair, black leather jacket, and sharp eyes that swept over the market like she expected trouble. She looked right at me. You're the girl, she said, not even a question. Walk with me. I followed her without speaking. She led me past the stalls, weaving between clusters of people until we reached a quiet alley behind a coffee shop. My name's Lorna, she said. I used to work in child services. Now I work alone. I explained everything. About Maisie. The notes. The sighting outside my school. Her father, and the council's decision to hide her. Lorna listened, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. Do you know where they sent her? She asked. I shook my head. No one will tell me. They think I'm a risk. You are, she replied plainly. But so am I. She pulled out a battered notebook from her coat pocket and flipped through the pages. There are only so many emergency placements they use when time's tight, especially for high-risk cases. I can narrow it down to 5, maybe 6. My pulse quickened. Can you find out which one? Lorna raised an eyebrow. This isn't a film, sweetheart. I can't just call up and pretend I'm from the council. But I know someone who might help for a price. I don't have any money. I don't mean cash. I mean risk. She tore out a page from her notebook and handed it to me. It listed 6 addresses across London and the South. One of these might be where she is, she said. But don't go knocking on doors. Watch. Observe. If you're right, you'll know. That night, I studied the list like it was sacred scripture. Each address became a possible lifeline, a maybe, a what if. Mum noticed something was wrong. You're not eating, she said softly over dinner. I'm just tired. She didn't push. Maybe she knew I was lying. Maybe she was too tired herself to dig. I made my plan. Over the next week, I would visit each of the addresses. One per day. After school, I would watch from a distance. Wait. Hope. And pray he wasn't already there. Because now I wasn't just trying to find Maisie. I was racing against a man who had already taken everything from her once. I couldn't let him do it again. Not while I was still breathing. The first 2 addresses led nowhere. One was a private foster home run by an elderly couple with 3 boys, all much older than Maisie. The second, a converted flat above a dentist in Hackney, had no signs of children at all. I watched for over an hour, crouched on a bus stop bench pretending to scroll my phone. No one came in. No one left. My heart sank. By the 4th day, I was losing hope. But the 3rd address was different. It was a modest semi-detached house in Streatham. The front door was painted red and slightly chipped at the edges. I arrived just before sunset and took position on the other side of the street, sitting on a low wall. I pretended to wait for someone, watching casually. About 10 minutes later, a woman stepped out to collect the post. She looked kind. Her cardigan hung loosely over a floral dress, and her salt and pepper hair was pinned back in a loose bun. Then I saw her. A small face peeked from behind the curtain upstairs. Brown eyes. Fringe too long. My breath caught. Maisie. She vanished the moment our eyes met, but I knew. It was her. I stayed for an hour, long after my fingers began to freeze. No sign of her again, but the woman returned once more, this time drawing the blind shut. I walked home in a daze. My feet moved without thought. The street lamps flickered on one by one, lighting the way like stars nudging me forward. The next morning at school, everything else blurred. Teachers spoke in muffled tones, friends asked if I was ill, but I just nodded and carried on. Every second wasted was one he might use. At lunch, I called Lorna. "She's there," I whispered. Her voice was sharp. "Are you certain?" "Yes." She sighed. "Then we need to act fast." "What do you mean?" "I spoke to someone in the system. Off the record. Her father's legal team has filed for visitation. They're going to try and overturn the order." My blood turned cold. "They can't," I said. "They shouldn't," she corrected. "But if no one protests, if no one shines a light, they might. Bureaucracy is a dark place. So what do? You get ready. I'll get you in." It felt surreal. I was 16. I couldn't drive, couldn't vote, couldn't even book a hotel without an adult. And yet somehow, I was about to defy the entire social care system to see my little sister again. Lorna met me at a park nearby after school. She handed me a navy blue hoodie and a small badge on a lanyard. "Put this on. Say nothing. Follow my lead." We walked up the path to the red door together. My hands trembled as Lorna knocked twice, then once again. The woman answered, surprise flashing in her eyes. "Miss Campbell." Lorna said smoothly, "We're here for the follow-up check." A pause. Then a slow nod. "Of course. Come in." I stepped into the warm hallway, breathing in the scent of vanilla and old wood. Then I heard her. A soft voice from the stairs. "Ellie." I turned. Maisie stood there, slightly taller than I remembered, wearing a navy school jumper too big for her frame, her eyes wide with shock. She ran to me. I dropped to my knees and caught her in my arms. Neither of us spoke. We just held on. And the world, for a brief moment, felt like it could still be put back together. It didn't take long for the warmth of our reunion to sour. Lorna had barely made it to the living room when the woman, whose name we now knew was Mrs. Hall, slammed the door behind her. "You can't just walk in here like that," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I'm sorry," Lorna replied, "but we have every right to check on her. The court order." "Court order?" Mrs. Hall spat. "You don't get to decide anything about her. This is my house now." I stood frozen, Maisie still clinging to me like a lifeline. My heart beat in my throat, knowing that in the blink of an eye, everything could be taken from me again. But Lorna stood her ground. "If you truly care about her, Lorna said calmly, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You'll understand why we need to have her back." Mrs. Hall's eyes flickered. She was angry, but there was something else there. Something I couldn't place. "You don't understand," she snapped. "I'm trying to protect her." I could see the conflict in her eyes now. She wasn't just defending her actions out of anger. There was fear, too. Lorna took a step forward. Protect her from what? Before Mrs. Hall could answer, the front door opened behind us. A tall man, wearing a well-fitted suit and carrying a briefcase, stepped inside. I stiffened. His presence was sharp, calculated. He wasn't here for a casual visit. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Hall?" the man asked, his voice low and measured. "Everything's fine," she said quickly, her face shifting into a mask of politeness. The man looked at us, his gaze sweeping over Lorna, then me, and finally resting on Maisie. I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes, followed by an unreadable expression. "We need to leave now," Lorna said, her voice steady but urgent. "We can't risk anything happening." Maisie's grip tightened on my hand. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. She wanted to go with us. I could see it in her face. But then, Mrs. Hall stepped forward. "I won't let you take her," she said firmly. "She's safer here. Safer with me." The man, who I now realized was her lawyer, made a small gesture to the door. "Let's not make this more complicated than it needs to be. You're out of your depth, Miss Campbell." Lorna's expression remained unchanged. "I'll take this to court if I have to." I could see the tension building between them. The silence was deafening, and in that silence, I made my decision. I turned to Maisie, bending down to meet her eyes. "Do you want to come with us?" Maisie nodded slowly, her lips trembling. "I'm scared, Ellie." "Listen to me," I said, pulling her closer. "I will protect you. We will get through this. No one can hurt you." She wiped a tear from her cheek and nodded again. I straightened up, looking at Lorna. "Let's go." We turned and made our way toward the door. "You're making a mistake," Mrs. Hall said, her voice trembling with something that was almost regret. But I couldn't stop now. I couldn't let Maisie stay in a place where she wasn't safe, no matter how much Mrs. Hall tried to convince herself it was for the best. As we left, I glanced over my shoulder. The door clicked shut behind us. Maisie was mine again. But for how long? The tension hadn't left us even as we walked down the front steps of the house. I held Maisie's hand tightly, trying to reassure her, though I was just as unsure as she was. Lorna was ahead, guiding us to the car. Her expression was intense, but her every move spoke of resolve. She knew what had to be done, and we couldn't afford to waste time. As we got into the car, Maisie climbed into the back seat, her eyes wide, still struggling to comprehend the whirlwind we'd just stepped into. I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something I hadn't in a while. Hope. But it was fleeting, because as much as I wanted to feel relief, the fight wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. "Are we safe now?" Maisie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We will be," I replied, my words sounding hollow even to my own ears. Lorna started the engine, her knuckles tight on the steering wheel. We drove in silence for a while, the only sound being the hum of the engine as we moved further away from the house. But it wasn't enough. Not for me, and definitely not for Maisie. After what seemed like an eternity, Lorna broke the silence. "We need to get to the solicitor's office. They'll know what to do next. It's the only way we can make sure she's protected." "I don't care what it takes," I said, my voice steady with a newfound determination. "I'll do whatever it takes to keep her safe." But even as I spoke those words, doubt began to creep in. Mrs. Hall hadn't been the only one to stand in our way. The lawyer who had appeared at the house was a major player in this, and there was no telling how far he'd go to make sure Maisie didn't leave. "We need to be smart about this," Lorna said, glancing at me. "We don't want to escalate things too quickly. It's better if we keep this quiet for now." But I knew better than to believe that. We had already crossed a line. We weren't just fighting for Maisie's safety anymore. We were fighting for her future, for her chance at a normal life, free from the fear and manipulation that had haunted her for so long. As we turned onto a quieter road, Lorna's phone rang. She answered it immediately, her voice calm, but with a note of urgency. I could only hear her side of the conversation, but the tone in her voice told me everything I needed to know. "No, I'm on my way now," she said. "We'll be there in 20 minutes. Just keep the door locked." I frowned, a sense of dread washing over me. "What's going on?" "It's the solicitor," Lorna said, hanging up. "They've got some information. Something we didn't know about." I could feel my heart race. "What kind of information?" Lorna didn't answer right away, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. Finally, she said, "It's about Mrs. Hall. She's not who she claims to be." I glanced back at Maisie, who was now curled up at her seat, her eyes closed. It wasn't the first time I'd seen her like this, lost in a world of her own, trying to escape the reality around her. But now, I saw a spark of something else in her eyes. It was as if she knew we were on the verge of something bigger than all of us. We arrived at the solicitor's office just as the evening light began to fade. The building was quiet, almost too quiet. The weight of the situation settled heavily in my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap. Inside, we were ushered into a small, dimly lit room. The solicitor, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Harris, was already waiting for us. "You're here," she said, standing up as we entered. "We have a lot to go over, and we don't have much time." As she spoke, my mind raced. The pieces were falling into place, but I couldn't yet see the whole picture. "You need to tell me everything," Mrs. Harris said, sitting down at the table. "What happened at the house?" I took a deep breath, then started from the beginning. The whole time, I could feel Maisie's gaze on me, as if she were trying to read me, trying to understand what was happening. When I finished, Mrs. Harris didn't speak right away. She simply sat back in her chair, her expression unreadable. Then finally she spoke. "There's one thing you need to understand. You're not the only one who wants Maisie. And this won't end the way you think." I froze. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Harris looked at us both, her eyes sharp. "There are people who'll stop at nothing to take her. And they've been watching you,